There is a moment quiet, subtle, but defining, when you realize the war you're fighting isn't outside of you, it's within. It's not the noise of the world that's destroying your peace. It's your reaction to it. Not the insults, not the gossip, not the rejection, not the chaos, but the way you let it own you, shape you, trigger you. And that moment of realization splits your life in two: the life ruled by emotion and the life ruled by mastery. Because if you don't learn to control your emotions, you will be controlled by everyone who knows how to manipulate them. A person who cannot control their anger becomes a weapon in the hands of anyone who knows how to press the right buttons. A person who cannot master their insecurity becomes a mirror that reflects the approval or disapproval of whoever is watching. A person who cannot hold their peace becomes a puppet chanked around by opinions, flattery, rejection, silence, chaos. And this world, this world will test you. It will throw noise at your stillness, fire at your patience, confusion at your clarity. Because the second you decide to own your emotions, everything around you begins to challenge that decision. But hear this: the storm around you does not matter if the storm within you is calm. It begins with understanding. Your emotions are messengers, not masters. They speak, they warn, they inform, but they do not lead. The moment they lead, your power is gone. You become reactionary, defensive, volatile, and someone who is volatile is predictable. And someone who is predictable is easy to control. And Dale Carnegie knew this. He didn't say, control others. He said, understand them. He didn't teach people how to dominate. He taught them how to master the most unruly, impulsive, erratic force of all their own feelings. Because once you understand that your mind is shaped by the thoughts you entertain, and your life is shaped by the emotions you permit, you stop blaming the world. You take back the wheel. You become dangerous, not because you're violent, but because you're unmoved. You become respected, not because you're loud, but because you're rooted. You become magnetic not because you perform, but because your inner world is no longer dictated by the external. You stop needing others to change so you can feel better. You stop demanding apologies to restore your dignity. You stop chasing closure that you now realize comes from you. And you stop lashing out in anger that only ever made you more powerless. Control your emotions, sir. Be controlled by everyone else's. There is no middle ground. If you don't command your thoughts, someone else's influence will. If you don't calm your nerves, someone else's drama will. If you don't secure your peace, the world will drag you into its chaos and hand you the bill. And don't confuse control with suppression. This isn't about numbing, it's about ownership. This is about feeling the rage, but not letting it ruin your day. Feeling the pain, but not letting it drive your decisions. Feeling the fear, but still stepping forward. Because the strongest people are not the ones who feel less. They're the ones who feel deeply, but respond wisely. And make no mistake, your response is everything. Not your appearance, not your talent, not your background. Your response is what determines who you become. You don't control what they say, what they do, or what they take from you, but you control whether they take your peace. And if they can take that, they own you. So you choose today, right now, to take your power back. You decide to no longer let the tone of their voice decide the tone of your day. You decide to no longer let their silence be louder than your self-worth. You decide to no longer let their chaos become your climate. And this kind of mastery requires training. Emotional training. The kind that doesn't happen on a stage, but in the silence. When someone disrespects you, and you breathe instead of retaliate. When someone disappoints you, and you release instead of cling. When the temptation to react comes like fire, and you let it pass like wind. That's where your greatness is formed. Not in the moments of applause, but in the moments no one sees when you choose discipline over drama, control over chaos, and stillness over noise. Because when your emotions are not in check, you sabotage everything you build. You burn bridges in moments of impulse. You speak words you can't unsay. You send messages you later regret. You act like the person you swore you'd never become. And then you wake up surrounded by ruins, friendships, partnerships, opportunities all destroyed, not by what others did, but by how you reacted. So you learn. Slowly, painfully, deliberately you learn that your freedom does not come from controlling them. It comes from mastering yourself. That's the real test. Not how good you are when things are easy, but how grounded you stay when everything around you is not. So you practice. Moment by moment, thought by thought, breath by breath. You train your mind to pause before it panics. You train your body to breathe before it breaks. You train your soul to stand before it spirals. And in that training, you become something rare. You become a person who walks into chaos and doesn't match it, who hears insults and doesn't absorb them, who sees confusion and doesn't add to it. You become a person who others feel safe around, not because you're passive, but because your power is under control. That is emotional strength. That is mental wealth. That is influence over others, but over yourself. You begin to realize how many of your wounds came not from what happened, but from how you responded. How often you handed over your peace for the cheap currency of reaction. How often you let one careless word dictate the entire narrative of your day, and it sobers you. Because when you finally look at your own hands and see the matches you lit, not just the fires, they started, you awaken to a new level of responsibility. And that responsibility, though heavy, is the foundation of freedom. Because no one truly has power over you unless they can provoke you. And when you are easily provoked, you are easily led. Your mood becomes a lever. Your silence becomes currency. Your anger becomes entertainment for those who know exactly how to trigger it. And when you start seeing it like that, as emotional slavery, you stop calling it just being human and start calling it what it really is, a loss of sovereignty. And you decide, never again. You decide to protect your peace like it's sacred. You decide to build emotional walls, not to shut people out, but to keep your power in. You decide to no longer allow your dignity to be dragged through the dirt of impulsive reaction. You decide that your energy is expensive, and not everyone can afford access to it. Because the truth is this: people will test you with chaos just to see if they can keep you from clarity. And if they can rattle your peace, they will try again, and again, and again. But when you stop responding to every fire they light, they stop believing they can burn you. When you stop entertaining every storm they bring, they begin to fear your silence more than they once fed on your noise. And in that silence, you reclaim something priceless. Control. Not control over them. That's not mastery. Mastery is control over you, over your own atmosphere, over your own state, over your own heartbeat, when the world accelerates. Because if you don't set the emotional tone of your life, someone else will. Someone bitter, someone impulsive, someone wounded, someone loud. And the tragedy is most people spend their entire lives becoming echoes of other people's storms. But you are no longer willing to live like that. You want to be a sanctuary, not a battlefield. You want to be a presence that heals, not a reaction that harms. You want to be the one in the room who does not mirror chaos, but transforms it. And to do that, you must go within. You must sit with the parts of you that rage and learn to soften them. You must revisit the wounds that scream and teach them how to whisper. You must rewire the beliefs that say, They made me feel this, and replace them with, I chose how to respond. Because every reaction is a choice. Every emotional spiral begins with permission. And every time you pause, every time you breathe, every time you choose silence over shouting, calm over chaos, stillness over storm, you break a generational pattern. You break your own addiction to drama. You raise your value in ways no resume can ever measure. You don't just become successful, you become sovereign. And people begin to notice. They won't always understand it. Some will resent your detachment because they mistook it for coldness. Some will feel uncomfortable around your peace because they've never known it. Some will poke, prod, and provoke just to see if you're really as calm as you appear. Let them. Let them rage. Let them spiral. Let them swing wildly in their emotional chaos. Because your peace is no longer something they can touch. You don't guard it with walls anymore. You embody it with presence. And presence is not passive, it is power under perfect control. That is what makes you unshakable. Not that you don't feel, but that you are no longer owned by what you feel. You still get angry, but you don't lose yourself in it. You still get hurt, but you don't hand your worth over to the one who caused it. You still get sad, but you don't mistake the sadness for your identity. You let emotions move through, but they no longer define you. And the more you live like this, the more others begin to change, not because you told them to, but because your energy makes their chaos feel foreign. Your stillness becomes a mirror. Your consistency becomes a standard. Your control becomes a challenge because it forces them to confront their lack of it. That is the kind of influence you were born to carry. And it begins where most never look, in the quiet space between trigger and response. In that space, your entire future is born. And in that sacred space between trigger and response, a new version of you is forged, not built by force, but revealed through refinement. The old youth, one who lashed out, who craved revenge, who needed to be understood at all costs, slowly fades into memory, not because they were wrong, but because they were untrained, undisciplined, raw. You see now that emotional strength is not about denying your fire. It's about learning how to carry it without burning everything down. You become precise, focused, measured. You choose your words not out of fear, but out of respect for yourself, for your future, for the kind of world you are silently shaping through your energy. Because when you control your emotions, you begin to control your environment, not by dominance, but by vibration. Your presence shifts the room. People speak more gently. They pause before they lie. They reconsider the drama they were about to invite you into. Why? Because your peace has gravity, and gravity doesn't beget pulls. You stop trying to change people. You outgrow them. You stop trying to argue with chaos. You become so calm it disarms them. You stop explaining your boundaries. You enforce them in silence. And that silence, it speaks volumes. It tells the world, I no longer owe you my energy. I owe it to myself. And then comes the loneliness. Yes, the temporary silence of self-mastery, the kind that feels cold at first because you're no longer reactive enough to be relatable. The kind that leaves you out of conversations because gossip no longer feeds you. The kind that makes you look stoic in a world addicted to outbursts. But endure it, because that loneliness isn't emptiness. It's clarity. It's pruning. It's the sacred shedding of everything that was attached to your unhealed self. And when the shedding is complete, what remains is gold. Your emotional discipline becomes your spiritual immunity. Your boundaries become sacred gates, not walls. Your presence becomes a calm that others pay attention to, even if they don't understand it. Because people feel when you're anchored. They feel when your peace is no longer a performance. When your self-control is no longer about pride, but about protection of your mission, your focus, your integrity. You stop trying to win arguments. You start winning space. You stop demanding apologies. You start commanding respect. And the greatest part, you do it without ever raising your voice. You become a person who no longer needs closure to move on, who no longer needs applause to stay committed, who no longer needs revenge to feel powerful, because you've mastered the hardest thing in the world, not letting someone else's storm become your forecast. And now, your energy becomes expensive, not because you're arrogant, but because you've finally understood its worth. Not everyone deserves access to your emotional world. Not everyone has earned the right to hear your vulnerability. Not everyone is qualified to influence how you feel about yourself. And when you learn to discern that, you stop bleeding for people who only came to watch you suffer. You stop arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing validation from people who can't even validate themselves. You stop opening your spirit to those who treat your soul like a stage for their ego. Because peace is no longer a luxury, it's your new baseline. And anyone who threatens it is not just testing you, they're revealing themselves. So you watch closely, not with judgment, but with clarity. Because a person's relationship with your emotions tells you everything about their relationship with their own. Do they nurture your calm? Or do they feed off your chaos? Do they hold space for your storms? Or do they light fires and call it honesty? You've learned that not everyone is ready to meet the version of you that has mastered their reactions. Some will resent your control because they can't control themselves. Some will call you cold because they're addicted to emotional heat. Some will call you distant because they're afraid of your boundaries. Let them. Because you're not here to explain your peace. You're here to protect it. And in protecting it, you become free not just from others, but from yourself. The past self, the impulsive self, the reactive self, the self that mistook being emotional for being real, the self that thought being loud meant being strong, the self that believed every feeling deserved a reaction. That self is gone now. What remains is the calm. What remains is the clarity. What remains is power. And once that power settles into your bones, not just as a thought, but as your nature, everything begins to shift. The way you walk into a room, the way you respond to disrespect, the way you sit in silence and still command attention. You don't need to raise your voice because your aura speaks louder than any word could. You don't need to argue anymore because your eyes hold the kind of weight that makes people reconsider their own chaos. You don't need to defend your worth because your presence makes it undeniable. That is the reward of mastering your emotions. You don't beg for respect. You embody it. You begin to feel the subtle shift in your own nervous system when conflict arises. Where once your heart would race, now it stays still. Where once you would jump to speak, now you wait measured, aware, discerning. You no longer confuse urgency with importance. You no longer let anxiety write your script. You've trained your body to remain still while your mind searches for truth. You've trained your breath to stay deep while the world gets louder. And because of that, you begin to win battles no one else even knows you're fighting. This is the unseen advantage of emotional mastery. You gain time to pause, time to see clearly, time to choose. And that time, those few seconds between stimulus and response, that is where your greatness is decided. Not in the heat of passion, not in the intoxication of anger, but in the quiet control of your own state. Every second you delay your reaction, you reclaim your crown. And while the world is impulsive, you become intentional. While others drown in drama, you rise in stillness. While others shout to be heard, You speak only when your words are clean, conscious, and aligned. And people begin to notice. They begin to ask, why doesn't anything rattle you? And your answer isn't a speech, it's your life. It's how you carry yourself. It's how you preserve your peace like it's priceless, because it is. You no longer take everything personally. You see that most people aren't attacking you. They're projecting their war onto the nearest battlefield. You stop catching arrows that weren't even aimed at your truth. You stop allowing other people's lack of self-control to infect your atmosphere. You no longer get swept into emotional whirlwinds created by people who have never learned how to sit in their own silence. Instead, you become the anchor, the mountain in the storm, the quiet in the chaos, the calm in the confrontation. You hold steady while others unravel. And you do it not for praise, but because you made a vow to yourself. A vow to no longer be a slave to what passes through your chest. A vow to never again hand your power to someone who can't manage their own. A vow to respond like a king, not a child. Like a queen, not a wounded girl. Like a soul who remembers who they are, even when the world tries to make them forget. And make no mistake, this doesn't make you emotionless. It makes you honorable. It makes you trustworthy. It makes you rare. Because in a world where people are told to speak your truth, even when they haven't processed it, you process, you purify, you pause, and then you speak from a place of grounded knowing. That's not weakness. That's mastery. You stop needing to correct everyone. You stop needing to prove anything. You stop needing the last word. Because you realize peace is louder than ego. Silence is stronger than noise. Detachment is more commanding than desperation. And the one who walks away calmly always walks away with power. Because when you control your emotions, you control your frequency. And when you control your frequency, you control your reality. No longer tossed by moods, no longer wrecked by gossip, no longer addicted to being liked. You become deeply aligned with yourself. So deeply, in fact, that even when someone disrespects you, you don't lose your dignity. Even when life betrays you, you don't betray yourself. Even when the world offers you chaos, you return to your stillness like a monk to the breath, over and over again. That is your strength. Not how fast you rise, not how many follow you, but how unshakable you remain when everything is trying to pull you back into the noise. Because in the end, it's not the fire in others that burns you. It's the fire within you that you never learned to hold. It's not the insult that wounds you. It's the wound that was already there, still unhealed, still tender, still reactive. The world presses on you not to destroy you, but to reveal what you haven't yet mastered. And every time you react without reflection, every time you explode without awareness, every time you let their storm become your script, you write the same story. A story of control lost, peace abandoned, dignity traded for a fleeting rush of being right. But not anymore. Not now. Now you've seen the cost. Now you've walked through enough ruins to know that emotional chaos never leaves without a bill. You've buried friendships in moments of fury. You've destroyed opportunities with one sharp sentence. You've watched love rot because you couldn't calm the hurricane inside your own chest. And it humbles you. It wakes you. It brings you face to face with a truth you can no longer escape. Emotional intelligence is not optional. It is survival. It is strategy. It is success. Because the most powerful people in the world are not those with the loudest voices, but those with the calmest presence, the ones who don't flinch when they're insulted, the ones who don't retaliate when they're misunderstood, the ones who don't fall apart when the plan does. That kind of person becomes a pillar, and the world is starving for pillars. People are drawn to the calm. They follow the grounded. They trust the steady. Because in the chaos of this world, calm is currency. Stillness is status. Peace is power. And when you master your emotions, you no longer walk into rooms hoping to be respected, you walk in already carrying it. You don't argue to be heard, you speak, because your silence is already respected. You don't flinch when people test you. You let them swing and miss. You don't panic when things fall apart. You adjust, recenter, return to yourself. Because you are no longer the wave. You are the ocean. And oceans don't panic. Oceans don't react. Oceans rise with the moon and rest with the tide. That's what emotional control gives you, the ability to rise and fall with rhythm, not reaction, to move with intention, not impulse, to return to peace faster and faster each time until peace is no longer something you visit, it's something you are. And from that place, you become unstoppable. Not because you fight harder, but because you fight less. Not because you always win, but because you know which battles are beneath you. Not because you never feel rage, but because your rage no longer drives the wheel. And that's what separates the undisciplined from the wise. The undisciplined react and regret. The wise pause and choose. You've chosen. You've chosen to let go of the identity that was built on outbursts and over-explanations. You've chosen to outgrow the version of you that needed to be loud to feel powerful. You've chosen the quiet strength of presence, the discipline of self-governance, the sacred stillness of knowing you cannot be manipulated by chaos that no longer belongs to you. Because once you've met your own storm and survived it, no one else's thunder can shake you. And when they try, because they will, you smile. Not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. Because you no longer need to control anyone else's behavior. You only need to master your own. And you have. Because now, you don't just manage emotions, you wield them. You don't fear anger, you understand it. You don't suppress sadness, you sit with it. You don't deny fear, you walk beside it until it tires and fades. Every emotion that once ruled you now reports to you. And you, like a skilled conductor, orchestrate your state of being not by force, but by awareness. You are no longer the audience to your own chaos. You are the composer. And when the world comes at you with judgment, you don't cower, you reflect. When it comes with provocation, you don't react, you breathe. When it tries to reduce you to instinct, you return to intention. Because you understand, a triggered person is easy to defeat. A calm person is untouchable. You are untouchable now, not because you never feel, but because you choose what feelings deserve your full attention. You choose what gets to stay. You choose what gets to enter your sacred field, and that choosing is power. Power not in the traditional sense, note in domination, not in bravado, but in alignment. Power that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. Power that doesn't need a podium to be respected. Power that sits in silence and rewrites the room just by staying still. That's who you've become. The one who sees through noise. The one who outlasts drama. The one who forgives, not because they were wrong, but because your peace is worth more than revenge. You don't chase closure. You are closure. You don't seek validation. You are the validation. You don't demand loyalty. Your presence earns it without negotiation. And the people who once poked your triggers now stand confused at your stillness. The ones who once watched you spiral now watch you rise. The ones who once relied on your emotional instability to gain leverage now find themselves powerless, speaking into silence, because you have chosen to be unshakable. Not numb, not passive, unshakable. And you've learned that emotional maturity is not about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming fluent. It's knowing the language of your soul so well that you never again let someone else translate your feelings for you. It's being able to sit in a fire of misunderstanding without having to prove you're not the villain. It's having the depth to say, I understand why you feel that way, even when they don't understand you at all. That is leadership, not the kind that commands armies, but the kind that commands trust, not the kind that forces obedience, but the kind that evokes respect. And it begins in the one battlefield most people never conquer: the self. So yes, you will be tested. They will still try. The world will always have noise. It will always have chaos. It will always have people who thrive on confusion and manipulation and triggering the unready. But you are no longer the unready. You have trained for this. Every breath you've held, every tear you've released, every moment you chose restraint when you could have chosen destruction, that was your training. And now, when the test comes, you pass without even speaking, because your peace speaks louder than your defense, because your control is not a show, it's the byproduct of self-respect, and self-respect is not negotiable anymore. You don't explain your peace. You don't justify your discipline. You don't dilute your boundaries. You simply walk quiet, present, deeply rooted. And those who can't meet you there fall away not as loss, but as alignment. You don't lose people anymore. You release what cannot survive the frequency you now embody. And now you stand not above the world, but apart from its chaos. You walk through the noise without becoming it. You sit among storms and remain unshaken. You face the same trials, hear the same criticism, feel the same winds of life, and yet you no longer sway, because what's anchored in truth does not tremble with the tides. What's ruled from within does not submit to what's outside. You are no longer reactive. You are responsive. You are no longer consumed. You are composed. You are no longer chained to every wave of emotion that passes through you. You've made peace your default, and stillness your shield. Not because you're empty, but because you are finally full. Full of clarity, full of direction, full of quiet strength that doesn't boast, doesn't rage, doesn't seek revenge, it simply remains. You've become the person who pauses when others panic. The one who sees, but does not absorb. The one who feels, but does not lose balance. And from that space, you begin to liven not as a puppet of the external world, but as the architect of your inner one. You no longer fear being misunderstood, because you no longer need to explain what your energy already makes clear. You no longer collapse when someone disrespects you, because your worth is no longer on loan to the opinions of others. You no longer chase peace. You carry it with you, wherever you go. And that peace is not fragile. That peace is forged. It was built in the moments you stayed silent instead of shouting, in the nights you chose reflection over retaliation, in the days you let your breath speak louder than your pride. In every instant you stood face to face with the storm and whispered, "You do not own me." And so now, when others try to provoke you, you no longer dance. You no longer bleed for the unhealed. You no longer entertain the chaos that once felt familiar. You don't shrink. You don't beg. You don't over-explain. You simply remain calm, collected, sovereign. Because you've seen the difference now. You've lived on both sides. You know what it's like to be ruled by your emotion stow, be tossed by every opinion, shattered by every disappointment, defined by every mood, and you know what it's like to take the wheel, to look your impulses in the eye and say, "No more." And from that moment forward, your life changed. Not instantly, but completely. Because control is not a single choice, it's 1,000 quiet ones, 1,000 pauses, 1,000 deep breaths, 1,000 moments of choosing yourself over reaction. And now, after all of it, you know, peace is not a gift, it's a responsibility. Control is not about others, it's about presence. And the most powerful thing you'll ever do is not scream louder. It's remain unmoved. And when the world sees that, when it meets a soul it cannot provoke, a heart it cannot bend, a mind it cannot manipulate, it remembers what true power looks like. It looks like you, silent, still, unshakable.